Welcome to the Kids World.
Kids World proudly presents the best fairy tales ever.
Snow White.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, a beautiful and kind queen sat by her window, sewing on a snowy winter's day. As she worked, she pricked her finger on her needle, and 3 drops of blood fell onto the snow outside. Looking at the blood against the white snow, she made a wish from the bottom of her heart. I wish for a child with skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony. Not long after, the queen gave birth to a daughter, and she named her Snow White. She was the most beautiful baby ever seen, with skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as dark as ebony. Sadly, after a few years, the queen became very ill and passed away. The king remarried a beautiful, but vain woman. The new queen was proud of her beauty and had a magical mirror that she would ask every day, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror would always reply, "You, my queen, are the fairest of all." However, as time passed, Snow White grew into a young woman, and she became even more beautiful than her stepmother. One day, when the queen asked the mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" the mirror replied, "You, my queen, are fair, it's true. But Snow White, beyond the forest with the 7 dwarfs, is 1,000 times fairer than you." Furious with jealousy, the queen ordered a huntsman to take Snow White into the forest and kill her. But the huntsman couldn't bear to harm Snow White. He told her, "Run, Snow White, run far away from here. Do not come back, for the queen will not stop trying to harm you." With a heavy heart, the huntsman let Snow White go, and she ran deep into the forest, not knowing what awaited her. Snow White wandered through the forest, feeling lost and afraid. As she walked deeper into the woods, she found a small, cozy cottage. It was surrounded by flowers, with a gentle smoke rising from the chimney. She knocked at the door, but there was no answer. Snow White entered the cottage and saw that everything inside was tiny, but neatly arranged. She was so tired from her journey that she decided to rest on one of the 7 small beds. She fell into a deep sleep, not knowing that the owners of the house, 7 kind dwarfs, would soon return home. The dwarfs were miners who worked deep in the mountains. When they returned home that evening, they were surprised to find Snow White sleeping in one of their beds. "Who is this?" asked the oldest dwarf. Snow White woke up and explained her story. The dwarfs were kind-hearted and decided to let her stay with them. In return, Snow White promised to help them with their chores and cook meals. The dwarfs warned her, "Be careful, Snow White. The queen may come after you." Back at the palace, the wicked queen once again asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror replied, "You are fair, my queen, but Snow White, beyond the mountains, is 1,000 times fairer than you." Furious, the queen disguised herself as an old peddler woman and traveled to the dwarf's cottage. She offered Snow White a beautiful, poisoned lace bodice. "This will make you look even more beautiful," she said. Snow White, unaware of the danger, put on the lace, and it was so tight that she fell unconscious. When the dwarfs returned, they quickly cut the lace and saved her. The queen was not giving up. The next day, she disguised herself as a different old woman and offered Snow White a poisoned comb. Snow White, who had a love for beautiful things, accepted it. As soon as the comb touched her hair, Snow White fell into a deep sleep. Once again, the dwarfs saved her by removing the comb. "The queen will never stop trying to hurt you," they warned her. The wicked queen, growing more desperate, finally created a poisoned apple, a perfect, shiny red fruit. Disguised as an old farmer's wife, she went to the cottage and offered the apple to Snow White. "It's the most delicious apple in all the land," the old woman said. Snow White, not suspecting a thing, took a bite of the apple. Immediately, she collapsed, falling into a deep, death-like sleep. When the dwarfs returned and found her, they were heartbroken. They placed Snow White in a beautiful glass coffin, as they could not bear to bury her. One day, a prince who had heard tales of Snow White's beauty passed through the forest. He came upon the glass coffin, and upon seeing Snow White, instantly fell in love with her. She is the most beautiful princess, he whispered. He kissed her gently on the lips, and at that very moment, the poisoned apple came out of Snow White's throat. Her eyes fluttered open. Snow White awoke, and the prince smiled at her, overjoyed that she had returned to life. Snow White and the prince soon returned to his kingdom. They were married in a grand ceremony, and the wicked queen, upon hearing of Snow White's survival and marriage, was so enraged that she met her end. Snow White and the prince lived happily ever after, surrounded by love, joy, and their faithful friends, the Seven Dwarfs. The end. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like and share.